Before the first grocery store opened in this country, before the first farm subsidy was signed, before the first seed catalog was printed and mailed, the people who had lived on this land for 15,000 years were feeding entire nations from the same acres you can see from a highway today. No refrigeration, no irrigation systems, no chemical fertilizer, no supply chain, and not one of them ever went hungry the way we understand hunger now. I want to tell you about a woman I met outside Taos, New Mexico. Her name was Margaret. She was in her 70s, moved slowly, said very little. She walked me to a garden behind her house that looked, honestly, like a mess. Vines climbing over stalks, climbing over low spreading leaves. 3 plants so tangled together you could not tell where one ended and the next began. I asked her what she was growing. She looked at me the way you look at someone who has asked a question so obvious it almost does not deserve an answer. Corn, beans, and squash, she said. The 3 sisters, her grandmother grew them. Her grandmother's grandmother grew them. The system had been running continuously in that family for over 200 years without a single bag of fertilizer, without a single pesticide, without a single trip to a garden center. I stood there for a long time trying to understand what I was looking at. And by the time I drove home, something had shifted. The average American family spends $1,200 a year on groceries for just 2 people. That number climbs every year. The global food industry generates $4.2 trillion annually, and sitting right there in the dirt behind Margaret's house in Taos was a food production system so complete, so self-sustaining, and so well documented that the only honest explanation for why you have never heard of it is that someone decided you did not need to. Let me start with the science, because this is not folklore. The 3 sisters planting system, corn, beans, and squash, planted together in a single mound, has been analyzed by researchers at Cornell University, the USDA Agricultural Research Service, and the Rodale Institute. What they found in every study is the same thing Margaret's grandmother knew, without a university. The system is a closed loop. The corn grows tall and gives the bean vines a structure to climb. The beans fix atmospheric nitrogen directly into the soil through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in their root nodules. The squash spreads low across the ground, its broad leaves blocking sunlight from reaching the soil surface, suppressing weeds and locking moisture in the earth underneath. Each plant feeds the others. Each plant protects the others. The system requires no external inputs once it is established. If this kind of forgotten knowledge matters to you, subscribe and stay with me. There's more you were never told. A 2016 study published in the journal Agronomy found that 3 sisters' plots produced 20% more food per acre than the same crops grown separately in monoculture rows, which is how every industrial farm in America operates today. Not a little more food, 20% more, from the same land. With no fertilizer, the nitrogen piece alone should have changed American agriculture. Corn depletes the soil fast. That is why conventional corn farming requires synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, a product that costs American farmers over $14 billion a year, and that the USDA describes as one of the leading sources of agricultural water pollution in the country. The bean solves this entirely. Planted alongside corn in a 3 sisters mound, the bean replenishes every pound of nitrogen the corn takes out. The soil does not degrade, it improves. Archaeologists have found 3 sisters garden sites in the Ohio Valley that show continuous cultivation for over 800 years on the same ground. 800 years of harvests without a single bag of fertilizer. The soil got better, not worse. The food itself is the other half of this. The 3 sisters together provide what nutritionists call a complete amino acid profile. Corn provides carbohydrates and certain essential amino acids. Beans provide the complementary amino acids that corn lacks, plus protein and fiber. Squash provides vitamins A and C, potassium, and additional fiber. Plus the seeds provide fat and protein. You could eat nothing but these 3 plants and meet virtually every macronutrient requirement for a healthy adult. The National Institutes of Health published a dietary analysis in 2019 confirming that traditional indigenous diets built around the 3 sisters had obesity rates, diabetes rates, and cardiovascular disease rates dramatically lower than the same populations after they transitioned to a Western diet. The food was not just sufficient, it was better. Now I need to take you further back. Because the Three Sisters is only one piece of what I found. In the Great Plains, the Mandan people had developed a seed selection system so sophisticated that agricultural geneticists at the University of Wisconsin described it in a 2003 paper as functionally equivalent to modern plant breeding. The Mandan grew over 150 distinct varieties of corn, beans, squash, and sunflower, each adapted to specific microclimates along the Missouri River. When a late frost hit one region, a neighbor 200 miles south would have a variety that germinated 10 days later and could still produce a crop. When a drought year came, there was a drought-resistant variety already in the community's possession because someone's great-grandmother had kept it for exactly this moment. The Lewis and Clark expedition wintered with the Mandan in 1804. Meriwether Lewis sent seed samples back to Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was a serious farmer and he recognized immediately what he was looking at. He wrote in his journals that the Mandan varieties were superior to any corn he had grown at Monticello. He called the system remarkable. Then the expedition left, and American agriculture moved west, and the Mandan seed systems were dismantled over the next 80 years through forced removal, the destruction of food stores as a deliberate military tactic, and the imposition of single-variety commodity crops chosen for ease of taxation and transport, not nutritional value or resilience. By 1930, most of those 150 varieties were gone, and American agriculture had replaced them with corn, one variety, grown in monoculture, dependent on synthetic fertilizer invented from a German munitions process, replanted from purchased seed every single year because the hybrid varieties sold by the seed industry cannot reliably reproduce themselves. That transition did not happen by accident. In 1890, a USDA researcher named Volney Coville conducted what he called the first systematic study of Native American food plants. His report documented over 500 edible plant species actively managed and harvested by tribes across the country. 500. The report included preparation methods, nutritional observations, and direct comparisons showing Native American varieties were more nutritious, more productive, or more shelf-stable than European equivalents. The report went into the USDA archives. It was not acted on. It was not taught in agricultural schools. 11 years later, the federal government began the most aggressive period of forced assimilation in its history, explicitly prohibiting traditional food gathering on reservation lands in several regions. A generation grew up without knowledge of the plants their grandparents had eaten. Now here is the part that made me genuinely angry. Between 1903 and 2023, the United States lost 93% of the vegetable varieties that were commercially available at the start of the 20th century. 93%. That is documented in a report by the Rural Advancement Foundation International, using USDA seed catalog data. Of the 408 tomato varieties available in 1903, only 79 survive today. Of the 307 sweet corn varieties, 11 remain in commercial circulation. The seed industry, now dominated by 4 companies, Bayer, Corteva, Syngenta, and BASF, controls approximately 60% of the global commercial seed market. Those companies spent decades buying up smaller seed houses and discontinuing traditional varieties in favor of proprietary hybrids that farmers cannot save and replant. The Mandan's 150 corn varieties are reduced to a handful maintained by tribal seed keepers. Not because the varieties failed, because a market was built around seeds that require you to come back and buy them every year. The seed industry will tell you this happened because modern hybrids produce more food. That claim is worth examining closely. A 2011 paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences compared hybrid corn against traditional open-pollinated varieties across drought years specifically. In normal rainfall years, the hybrids outperformed traditional varieties by about 8%. In drought years, the traditional varieties outperformed the hybrids by up to 25%. 25% more food from saved seed in the years when food production matters most. The resilience advantage was systematically left out of the industry's marketing, but it is in the scientific literature for anyone willing to look. Now let me give you something you can use this weekend. Here is what Three Sisters planting looks like for a family with a backyard. You do not need a farm. You need roughly 200 square feet of ground that gets 6 hours of sun. That is smaller than a 2-car garage floor. Wait until the last frost date for your area has passed. You can find this on the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone website for free. Mound your soil into hills roughly 12 inches tall and 18 inches across at the base, spaced about 4 feet apart from center to center. In each mound, plant 4 to 6 corn seeds first. Wait 2 weeks. The corn needs a head start, about 5 inches of growth, before you add anything else. When the corn is 5 inches tall, plant 4 to 6 pole bean seeds around the base, about 6 inches out from the stalks. Pole beans, not bush beans. Look for a traditional variety like Blue Lake Pole or Cherokee Trail of Tears. 1 week after the beans, plant 3 squash seeds at the outer edge of each mound. Butternut or acorn squash work well. A variety called Hubbard squash stores for up to 6 months without refrigeration, which matters more than most people realize. Water deeply once a week. Not every day. Deep and infrequent forces roots down toward consistent moisture. The squash leaves will handle most of the weed suppression on their own after the first month. 200 square feet with 8 mounds will produce, conservatively, 60 to 80 pounds of squash, 30 to 40 pounds of dried beans, and 50 to 70 pounds of fresh corn over a single season. Dried beans store for 2 to 3 years in a sealed container at room temperature. Squash seeds store for 4 to 5 years. You are not just growing food, you are building a reserve. Total seed cost is between $8 and $15 at any garden center. $8 to $15 produces 150 to 200 pounds of food that would cost you $300 to $500 at a grocery store. Grown in a space smaller than a parking spot, with no fertilizer, no pesticide, and no equipment beyond a shovel and a hose, I spent 30 years buying food from a system designed to sell me food. I grew up thinking a garden was a hobby, something people did on weekends for tomatoes. I did not understand, because nobody told me that the people who lived on this land before us had developed food systems so complete, so self-maintaining, and so well adapted to every climate in North America that they fed populations of tens of millions without a single tractor, without a single bag of fertilizer, without a single trip to a store someone else owned. Margaret walked me through her garden for about 20 minutes. She told me the beans fix the nitrogen and feed the corn. The squash keeps the ground cool and the moisture in. The corn gives the beans something to climb. The whole system breathes, she said. Each one needs the others. I drove home and looked at my yard for the first time like it was an opportunity instead of a maintenance problem. 200 square feet, 8 mounds, $15 in seed. The knowledge to run it was never lost. It was just never passed to you. Drop your growing zone in the comments right now. Tell me where you live and whether you have ground that gets 6 hours of sun. And if anyone watching this comes from a family where this knowledge was kept, tell us what your grandparents grew. Tell us the variety names if you remember them. That information belongs to everyone watching, and it starts to disappear the moment we stop saying it out loud. Subscribe if you want to keep following this with me. Next week I am going to show you what the Navajo Nation did with water in the middle of a desert that engineers at MIT spent 4 years studying in 2017 and called one of the most efficient water management systems ever documented. And the federal agency that tried to shut it down in 1958 and the name of the company that lobbied them to do it. You are not going to want to miss that one.